Billionaire came home early, expecting peace. Instead, he caught his wife slapping their maid's daughter. What he did next left everyone in utter disbelief. It started like any other quiet Tuesday in the Prescott mansion. The lights were low, the air still. "Rebecca," he called, loosening his tie, expecting the familiar calm of home. Instead, what David Prescott heard was a sound that would change everything. A child's cry, sharp and frightened. Then her voice. "You sick little girl. Do you have any idea what you've done?" In that moment, the man who'd built empires realized he didn't know the world inside his own walls. Behind the perfect smiles and charity galas, something far darker had been growing, unseen, unchallenged. And what started as a husband coming home early ended as the night his entire life shattered. This is the story of how truth walked through the door, and nothing was ever the same again. Just before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. Now let's jump back in. Enjoy the story. A man's true character is revealed not in boardrooms, but in the quiet corridors of his own home. David Prescott believed his life was a fortress of success, built on principles of honor and integrity. But on a calm Tuesday evening, he would discover the deepest betrayal was not from a business rival, but from within his own walls. The heavy oak door of the Prescott estate closed with a soft, satisfying click. The sound usually brought David a sense of peace. It was the sound of leaving the world behind. The world of mergers, of stock prices, of relentless ambition. He was David Prescott, the CEO whose name was synonymous with innovation. His company, a tech giant he had built from the ground up, was his public legacy. But inside these walls, he was just a man, a husband. He hoped, one day, to be a father. Tonight, he was home early. A rare event. A board meeting had been unexpectedly canceled, freeing his evening. He smiled to himself, imagining his wife Rebecca's surprise. They could have a quiet dinner. They could talk about something other than quarterly earnings. He loosened his tie, the silence of the grand marble foyer a welcome comfort. He walked past the portrait of his grandfather, General James Prescott, a man whose stern gaze and chest full of medals always seemed to be measuring him. The general was a legend, a war hero who valued discipline, honor, and the protection of the innocent above all else. David had spent his life trying to live up to that silent, painted standard. As he moved toward the main living area, a sound broke the stillness. It was faint at first, a child's whimper. It was a sound so out of place in the vast, immaculate home that David paused, his hand still on his briefcase. He knew that sound. It was Chloe, the 9-year-old daughter of his housekeeper, Emily Carter. Emily was a treasure, a kind and diligent woman who had worked for him for 5 years. Sometimes, when school was out or if Emily's sitter was unavailable, Chloe would come with her. The girl was a quiet, bright presence in the house. She had sunshine blonde hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. She was always polite, always respectful, often found curled in a corner with a book. Her presence had never been a problem. The whimper came again, louder this time, followed by a sharp, cruel hiss. It was Rebecca's voice. "Look what you did. You clumsy, useless little girl." David's blood ran cold. He quickened his pace, his polished Italian shoes making no sound on the thick Persian rugs. He stopped just shy of the archway to the grand salon, concealed by the shadows. What he saw made the air leave his lungs. The scene was a grotesque painting of contrasts. The room was bathed in the soft glow of twilight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. Gilded furniture and priceless art adorned the walls. In the center of it all stood his wife, Rebecca. She was the picture of elegance in a tailored silk dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her diamonds glittering at her neck and ears. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. But her expression was something David had never seen before. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated loathing. It was directed downward at little Chloe. The child was cowering near a delicate mahogany side table. Shards of what looked like a porcelain figurine lay shattered on the floor around her feet. Chloe was crying, silent tears streaming down her pale, freckled cheeks. She held one hand to her face, a red mark blooming on her skin. "Do you have any idea what that was?" Rebecca's voice was low, venomous. "That was a gift from my grandmother. It has been in my family for 100 years. Her mother will be working for the rest of her life just to pay for a single piece of it. I am sorry, Chloe sobbed, her small body trembling. It was an accident. I was just dusting like Mama taught me, and I bumped the table. Liar, Rebecca snapped. You were playing. I know you were. Children like you can't help yourselves. You have no appreciation for beautiful things because you come from nothing. David felt a tremor of rage shake his entire body. It was a cold, unfamiliar anger. Children like you. The words echoed in the opulent room, ugly and out of place. This was his home, a place he thought was built on respect, on the values the general had instilled in him. He was about to step into the room, to let his presence be known, when Rebecca did something that stopped his heart. She raised her hand, her movements sharp and precise, and she slapped the little girl across the face. The sound was sharp, a sickening crack that seemed to silence the entire world. Chloe cried out, a small, wounded sound, and stumbled backward, tripping over the rug and landing hard on the floor. She curled into a ball, her sobs now loud and desperate. David was paralyzed, not by fear, but by a horrifying clarity. It was as if a veil had been ripped from his eyes. He had been married to Rebecca for 4 years. For years of social events, of charity galas, of perfectly curated dinners. She had always been the perfect corporate wife. Graceful, intelligent, charming. She charmed his business partners, his friends, his board members. He had believed he knew her. But this woman, this monster standing over a weeping child, was a stranger. A complete and utter stranger who had been living in his home, sleeping in his bed. Every polite smile she had ever given a staff member now seemed like a lie. Every word of praise for Emily's work now felt like a calculated performance. He thought of all the times he'd come home to find Emily looking tired and tense. He had assumed it was the stress of being a single mother. He thought of the times Chloe had been unusually quiet, almost invisible, whenever Rebecca was in the room. He had thought the girl was just shy. How could he have been so blind? His grandfather's voice seemed to echo in his mind from a distant childhood memory. A man who fails to see what is right in front of him is a fool, David. But a man who sees it and does nothing is a coward. Rebecca seemed to savor the child's fear. She took a step closer, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the girl. Now you will learn what happens when you touch things that don't belong to you. You will stay here and pick up every single piece. And if you cut yourself, you will not bleed on my rug. That was it. The spell of shock was broken. A storm of ice and fire erupted inside David. Rebecca. His voice was not loud. It was quiet. So quiet it seemed to absorb all the sound in the room. But it cut through the air like a shard of glass. Rebecca froze. Her head snapped up. She spun around, and for a fraction of a second, the mask of hatred was still on her face. Then, seeing him, it vanished. It was a stunning transformation. The cruelty melted away, replaced by a look of wide-eyed, innocent surprise. It was the most masterful acting he had ever witnessed. David, darling, she gasped, bringing a hand to her chest in a gesture of feigned shock. You're home. I didn't hear you come in. Her eyes flickered from him to the crying child on the floor, then to the broken porcelain. The gears in her mind were turning, calculating, spinning a new reality. This is not what it looks like, she started, her voice now filled with a strained, breathy quality he now recognized as completely artificial. I know this looks terrible, but this little girl, Chloe, she deliberately smashed my grandmother's heirloom. David didn't look at Rebecca. He couldn't. To look at her would be to unleash the fury coiling in his gut. Instead, his gaze went to Chloe, who was still on the floor, trying to muffle her sobs into her small hands. Her blonde hair was messy, her face stained with tears and marked by the red imprint of Rebecca's hand. He could see a small scrape on her elbow from the fall. He walked slowly into the room, his briefcase dropping to the floor with a dull thud. He ignored his wife completely, his entire focus on the terrified child. He crouched down, not too close, giving her space. He kept his voice low and steady, the way his grandfather had taught him to speak to a frightened horse or a soldier on his first day of battle. Chloe, he said softly, it's Mr. Prescott. Are you okay? The little girl flinched at the sound of his voice. She looked from him to Rebecca, her blue eyes wide with a terror that ripped at David's soul. This was not the fear of a child who had simply broken something. This was the deep, ingrained fear of a child who knew punishment was swift and cruel. A child who knew that the adults in her world were not all safe. David, what are you doing? Rebecca's voice was sharp with indignation. She is the one who should be apologizing. She needs to learn a lesson about consequences. He held up a hand, a clear signal for her to be silent, but he never took his eyes off Chloe. Chloe, he repeated gently. Look at me. You are not in trouble with me. I just want to know if you are hurt. Slowly, hesitantly, the girl gave a tiny nod. She pointed a trembling finger to her cheek, where the red mark was already starting to darken. Then to her elbow, which was bleeding slightly. I see, David said, his voice still calm, but a cold, hard knot was tightening in his chest. Where is your mother, Chloe? She went to the store, Chloe whispered, her voice so quiet he could barely hear it. Mrs. Prescott said the silver polish was the wrong kind. She sent Mama to get a new one. Of course she did. Rebecca had sent the mother away. She had waited until she had the child alone. The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was planned. It was a pattern. He was sure of it now. David, this is ridiculous, Rebecca interjected, her voice rising. You're coddling her. This is exactly the problem. These people think they can get away with anything because of soft-hearted employers like you. She broke a priceless antique. She needed to be disciplined. Discipline. David stood up slowly. He finally turned to face his wife. For the first time, he looked, really looked, at the woman he had married. He saw the elegant dress, the expensive jewelry, the beautiful face. But underneath it, he now saw something ugly and twisted. He saw a bully who got her power from terrifying a 9-year-old girl. He studied his face. Her expression was one of righteous anger, but he saw something else in his eyes. A flicker of panic. A hint of fear that her authority was being challenged. This wasn't about a broken figurine. It was about control. You call that discipline? David asked, his voice dangerously level. I call it abuse. Rebecca let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a brittle, ugly sound. Abuse? Don't be so dramatic, David. I simply gave her a little tap to get her attention. She was being hysterical. She needs to understand that in a house like this, there are rules. You work 14 hours a day building your empire. You have no idea what it takes to manage a home of this size, to manage the staff. It's her job to maintain standards. The way she said staff dripped with a disdain he had never noticed before. To him, they were people. Emily, the cook, the groundskeeper. They were part of the household. To Rebecca, they were just staff. A lower class of people who needed to be managed. And your standards include hitting a child? He asked. My standards include teaching respect for property and for the people who own it, she retorted, crossing her arms. Something her mother has clearly failed to do. I am the lady of this house, David. It is my responsibility to ensure order. He looked from his wife's defiant face to the small, broken girl on the floor. An image of his grandfather flashed in his mind. The general, a man who had faced down armies, had always said that the truest measure of a person's strength was how they treated those with no power. In that moment, David Prescott, the billionaire CEO, felt a profound sense of shame. He had built an empire. He had conquered the business world. But he had allowed a tyrant to rule his own home. He had been so focused on the world outside. He had failed to see the ugliness that had taken root within his own walls. He had failed the most important test of all. He had failed to protect the innocent under his own roof. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this was not the first time. The terror in Chloe's eyes was not new. It was learned. It had been taught, lesson by cruel lesson, in the quiet moments when he was away at the office, building his empire. The battle for his company had been won. But the battle for his home, for his honor, had just begun. And unlike Rebecca, he did not fight with slaps and cruel words. He fought with strategy, with resources, and with a cold, relentless resolve that she was about to discover was far more devastating than she could ever imagine. David ignored the sharp intake of Rebecca's breath, a sound of pure indignation. He kept his focus entirely on Chloe. The world had shrunk to this one task, to show this child she was safe. He offered a small, sad smile. Come on, he said softly. Let's get you up. That floor can't be comfortable. He extended his hand, palm up. He didn't try to touch her, leaving the choice entirely hers. For a long moment, Chloe just stared at his hand. It was large but steady. It wasn't raised to strike. It was open, an invitation. Her gaze flickered one last time toward Rebecca, who stood like a statue of cold fury by the fireplace. Then, making a decision that must have taken every ounce of courage she possessed, Chloe placed her small, trembling hand in his. Her skin was cold. David gently helped her to her feet. She was so small, so fragile. The red mark on her cheek seemed to burn against her pale skin. He felt another wave of protective anger, but he pushed it down, converting it into a deep, steady calm. Panic would not help. Rage would only frighten the child more. What he needed now was the general's quiet strength. "I keep a first aid kit in the library," he said, his voice even, "for when I'm clumsy working on my models. Let's go get that elbow cleaned up." He started to lead her out of the room, his grip on her hand gentle but firm. "Where do you think you're going?" Rebecca's voice cracked like a whip. "She hasn't cleaned up her mess. She needs to learn responsibility." David stopped but didn't turn around. He spoke to the air in front of him, his words meant for his wife, but his tone meant to soothe the child whose hand he held. "The mess can wait. A child's well-being cannot. We will discuss this later, Rebecca. Do not follow us." It was not a request. It was an order, delivered with the quiet authority he usually reserved for his most difficult negotiations. For once, Rebecca seemed to understand she had crossed a line he would not allow to be uncrossed. She remained silent, her fury a palpable force at their backs as he led Chloe out of the room and down the hall to the library. The library was David's sanctuary. Walls lined with books from floor to ceiling, the scent of old paper and leather in the air. In one corner stood a large table where he built intricate models of historical warships, a hobby that calmed his mind. He led Chloe to one of the large, comfortable leather armchairs and gently sat her down. "Okay," he said, opening a cabinet and retrieving a small white box with a red cross on it. "Let's take a look." He knelt before her, just as he had in the other room. He opened the kit and took out an antiseptic wipe and a small bandage. He worked with a slow, deliberate tenderness, dabbing at the scrape on her elbow. Chloe watched his every move, her body still tense, ready to flinch away. "Does it sting?" he asked. She shook her head, though he saw her wince slightly. "You're very brave," he said. He finished cleaning the small wound and carefully applied the bandage. "There, good as new." He put the supplies away and pulled up a small ottoman, sitting opposite her. The great, quiet room seemed to wrap them in a protective silence. Here, away from Rebecca's venomous presence, Chloe's trembling began to subside. "Chloe," he began gently, "I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be very honest with me. Can you do that?" She nodded, her eyes fixed on his face. "Before you say anything," he continued, leaning forward slightly, "I want you to hear me. Nothing you say will get your mother in trouble. Her job is safe. You are safe. I give you my word. No matter what Mrs. Prescott has told you, I am the one who makes the decisions about who works in this house. And I say your mother stays. Do you understand?" He needed her to believe him. He saw the conflict in her eyes, the hope warring with the fear that had been drilled into her for who knew how long. She said she would tell you Mama was a thief," Chloe whispered, the words tumbling out as if they had been held back by a dam. "She showed us a necklace. She said she'd put it in Mama's purse and call the police. She said no one would believe us." David's hands clenched into fists on his knees. He forced them to relax. He had to remain calm for her. "She will not be doing that, Chloe. I will make sure of it." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Has Mrs. Prescott hurt you before? Has she ever hit you?" Chloe's eyes immediately filled with fresh tears. She shook her head quickly. "No, not like today. Not a slap." The qualification was damning. He waited, letting the silence stretch. She pushes sometimes," the girl finally admitted, her voice barely audible. "If I'm in her way. Or she grabs my arm really hard if she's angry. She says it's to make me listen." "And what does she say to you when she's angry?" David asked, his heart aching with every word she spoke. "That I'm a nuisance. That Mama is lucky to have a job cleaning up after important people. She says I have to be extra good and extra quiet because we're not like you." "What does she mean, not like you?" Chloe looked down at her own hands, twisting in her lap. "She says people without money have to know their place. She says I shouldn't look her in the eye. She says my clothes are cheap and my hair is a common shade of blonde. She tore up my drawing once." A single tear rolled down her cheek. It was a picture of a castle. She said it was clutter and threw it in the fire. Every confession was a new cut. This was systematic, psychological torture. Rebecca hadn't just been cruel. She had been trying to methodically break a child's spirit, to crush her sense of self-worth. It was a campaign of cruelty waged in secret. "How often does this happen, Chloe?" "Mostly when you're not here," she said. "Or when you're on business trips. She's nice when you're around. She smiles at me." The performance. It was all a performance. The perfect wife was a carefully constructed fiction, a mask she wore for him and for the world. He felt a fool. A blind, trusting fool. "You're being ridiculous, David. You're interrogating a child." Rebecca's voice echoed from the hallway. She had disobeyed him. She was standing in the library doorway, her arms crossed, her face a mask of fury. David stood up slowly, placing himself between Rebecca and Chloe, a symbolic shield. "I told you to stay in the salon, Rebecca. This is my house too, and I will not be ordered around while you listen to the pathetic fantasies of a lying little girl who is trying to get out of trouble." She took a step into the room. "She is manipulating you. Can't you see it? She knows you're a soft touch." "Is that what this is?" David asked, his voice deathly quiet. "A fantasy?" The mark on her face, is that a fantasy? The fear in her eyes? Is that a performance? "I barely touched her," Rebecca shrieked, her carefully controlled facade beginning to crack under the pressure. It was a parental tap, something she should be getting from her own mother. Honestly, the way Emily lets his run wild is a disgrace. She has no control over the girl. His. She had used the wrong pronoun. It was a tiny slip, a crack in her armor, but it spoke volumes about how little she cared, how little she saw Chloe as a person. She was an object, a nuisance, an it. Before David could respond, a new voice joined the toxic chorus. "Mr. Prescott? Mrs. Prescott." It was Emily Carter. She stood in the hallway just behind Rebecca, holding a small paper bag with a new silver polish. Her eyes, wide and fearful, took in the scene. She saw Rebecca's rage, David's cold fury, and her daughter, crying in the large armchair. Her face, already etched with the lines of a hard life, seemed to age another 10 years in an instant. All the color drained from her cheeks. "Oh no," Emily whispered, the bag slipping from her numb fingers and landing softly on the carpet. "Chloe, baby, what happened?" Rebecca spun around to face her. The sweet, poisonous mask was back in place in an instant. "Emily," she said, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. "We've had a little incident. Your daughter got careless and broke a very valuable, very sentimental family heirloom." She gestured vaguely back toward the salon. "Mr. Prescott and I were just discussing the need for stricter supervision when you bring her to work." Emily's gaze went straight to the red mark on Chloe's cheek. Her breath hitched. She looked at Rebecca, then at David, and a look of profound, soul-crushing resignation settled over her features. It was the look of a person who had been fighting a losing battle for a very long time. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Prescott," Emily said automatically, her voice hollow. She rushed to her daughter's side, pulling her into a fierce hug. "I'm sure she didn't mean it. We'll pay for it. I'll work extra hours. Whatever it takes." "It's not about the money, Emily," Rebecca said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "It's about the principle. It's about respect." Chloe was sobbing into her mother's shoulder, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry." David watched the exchange, his heart a block of ice in his chest. He saw the whole dynamic laid bare. Rebecca, the tyrant. Emily, the hostage, forced to apologize for her own child's abuse to protect their livelihood. And Chloe, the victim, caught in the middle, learning the terrible lesson that sometimes telling the truth was the most dangerous thing you could do. He had seen enough. The time for quiet questions was over. The time for action was here. He stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. "That's enough." Both Rebecca and Emily looked at him. He looked directly at Rebecca, his eyes cold and hard as granite. "You and I will talk later. But right now, your part in this conversation is over." The finality in his tone was absolute. Then he turned to the terrified housekeeper. "Emily," he said, his voice softening, but still firm with authority. "I need you to take Chloe into my study. It's at the end of the hall. Please wait for me there. Nobody will bother you." He gave a pointed look at his wife. Emily looked confused, terrified of defying Mrs. Prescott, yet hearing a lifeline in Mr. Prescott's tone. "Go on," David said gently. "It's okay. I need to hear from you and Chloe what has been happening in my home." Clutching her daughter's hand, Emily Carter nodded. She threw one last, frightened glance at Rebecca, then scurried out of the library, leading Chloe down the hall. David was left alone with his wife. The silence in the library was heavy, suffocating. Rebecca stared at him, her blue eyes narrowed, her mouth a thin, hard line. The mask was gone completely now. What was left was cold, calculating rage. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice shaking with fury. "How dare you undermine me in front of the help? You have no idea what you've just done." "Oh, I think I do," David replied, his voice a low growl. "I'm finally beginning to understand exactly what's been done. In my house, behind my back." He took a step toward her, and for the first time since he'd known her, he saw a flicker of genuine fear in Rebecca's eyes. She had mistaken his quiet nature for weakness. She was about to learn how wrong she was. "You are mistaken," David said, his voice a low, dangerous hum that seemed to vibrate in the very air of the library. "I know exactly what I've done. I've opened my eyes. The question is, Rebecca, do you have any idea what you've done?" She stared at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The fear he had seen was gone, replaced by a defiant, cornered sort of bravery. She was a fighter. He had always admired that about her in the business world, where her sharp wit and social grace could disarm the most difficult opponents. Now, seeing that same ferocity twisted into something so ugly, he felt only revulsion. "I have done what was necessary to maintain order in this house," she hissed. "Something you know nothing about. You walk in and out of this perfectly managed world I've created for you, and you have the audacity to judge me? You have no idea the pressure I'm under. The luncheons, the charities, the endless dinners. I have to present a perfect image. Our perfect image. And that includes having staff who know their place." Their place. David repeated the words as if they were a foreign language. "Their place is to be treated with dignity and respect. They are employees, Rebecca, not serfs. Emily Carter is a single mother trying to raise her daughter. She works hard. She is honest. And she deserved our protection, not our contempt." "Protection?" Rebecca laughed, a sound devoid of all humor. "She is the maid, David. It is not our job to protect her. It is her job to serve us. And her brat of a daughter needs to learn not to touch things that are 1,000 times more valuable than she is." There it was, the raw, unfiltered ugliness of her worldview. It was a philosophy of value based on wealth, a caste system of her own creation where a human child was worth less than a piece of porcelain. "That figurine," David said, his voice dropping even lower, "was a gift from your grandmother, you said. Tell me, what do you think the general would say about what you did tonight?" He gestured to the portrait in the main foyer, though they couldn't see it from the library. Its presence was always felt. A man who earned his medals protecting people from bullies just like you. The mention of his grandfather was a calculated blow. He knew she prided herself on being a part of the Prescott legacy. "Don't you dare bring your grandfather into this," she snapped. "This has nothing to do with him. This is about our home, our life. What will people say when they find out you took the word of a maid over your own wife?" "I'm not concerned with what people will say," David replied coolly. "I am concerned with the truth." And the truth was on a little girl's face. "I saw it with my own eyes." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the space between them. "I don't know who you are anymore, Rebecca. Or perhaps, I never knew you at all." He turned his back on her, a gesture of finality. "I'm going to speak with Emily and Chloe. I suggest you use the time to think. Think very carefully about what your next words to me will be, because they may very well be your last in this house." He didn't wait for a reply. He walked out of the library, leaving her standing alone amidst the silent, leather-bound witnesses of his family's history. He felt her stare burning into his back, a mixture of hatred and disbelief. She had always been able to manage him, to steer him with a clever word or a charming smile. She was realizing, far too late, that the man she thought she had married was not the man she was dealing with now. He walked down the hall to his study. The door was slightly ajar. He could hear the soft, muffled sound of Emily trying to comfort her daughter. He knocked softly before entering. The study was a smaller, more intimate room than the library. A large mahogany desk sat before a window overlooking the darkening gardens. Emily and Chloe were huddled together on a plush sofa. Chloe's face was buried in her mother's side, and Emily was stroking her blonde hair, whispering to her in a low, soothing voice. They both looked up as he entered, their expressions guarded and fearful. "I'm sorry to intrude," David said, closing the door gently behind him. "I just wanted to make sure you were both all right." "We're fine, Mr. Prescott," Emily said quickly, her voice tight with strain. "I am so sorry for the trouble Chloe has caused. I don't know what got into her. It won't happen again. I'll make sure of it." David sighed and pulled a chair over to face them. He didn't sit behind his desk. He wanted no barriers between them. "Emily," he said, his voice kind but firm. "Please, stop apologizing. Your daughter did nothing wrong." Emily looked at him, her eyes wide with confusion. "But the figurine is a thing," David said simply. "It can be replaced. Your daughter cannot. Her well-being, her feeling of safety in this house, is more important than any object. I need you to understand that." He looked at Chloe, who peeked out from her mother's embrace. "And I need you to understand that, Chloe. You did not cause this trouble." Emily started to cry then, silent, weary tears that spoke of years of struggle and fear. "I didn't know what to do," she whispered, her carefully maintained composure finally breaking. "She's always been difficult, Mrs. Prescott, especially when you're away. The little comments, the looks. She makes Chloe re-clean things that are already spotless. She inspects her work like a drill sergeant. I told Chloe to just stay out of her way, to be invisible. I thought if we just worked hard and didn't make waves." "You thought you could protect your daughter by being compliant," David finished for her, his heart heavy with empathy. "That is not your fault, Emily. It is the fault of the person who created an environment where you felt you had no other choice." He leaned forward, looking directly into the housekeeper's eyes. "Emily, I need the truth. What Chloe told me in the library, about the threats, about being called names, about her drawing being destroyed. Is it all true?" Emily hesitated, her ingrained fear of causing trouble warring with the fierce, protective love she had for her child. She looked down at Chloe, at the fading red mark on her cheek, and her decision was made. She took a deep breath and nodded, her eyes meeting his with a new, fragile strength. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "It's all true, and more. She withholds my pay for what she calls infractions, a fingerprint on a mirror, a cushion not plumped correctly. She says it's to teach me attention to detail. She told me once that if I ever complained to you, she would make you believe I was stealing from her. She said a man like you would always believe his wife over the help." David felt a cold fury settle deep in his bones. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger he had felt in the salon. This was a colder, more patient rage. It was the anger of a strategist who has just seen the enemy's entire battle plan. Rebecca hadn't just been abusive. She had been systematically isolating and controlling Emily, using financial threats and psychological manipulation to ensure her silence. "She was wrong," David said, his voice resonating with absolute conviction. "She underestimated me, and she underestimated you." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn, now shrouded in the evening gloom. The grounds were immaculate, a testament to Emily's hard work and dedication. A home should be a sanctuary for everyone who lives and works within it. This had become a prison for this small family. "Neither of you are staying here tonight," he said, turning back to face them. Emily's eyes widened in panic. "Mr. Prescott, please. I need this job. I have nowhere else to go. We'll be better. Chloe will be better. I'll leave her with a neighbor from now on. I swear." "Emily," he interrupted gently, "you are not being fired. I am putting you and Chloe up in a hotel for the night. A nice one. You will order room service, watch movies, and you will get a good night's sleep, knowing you are both safe. My personal driver will take you. He will be here in 15 minutes. He was taking control. It was what he did best. Assess a situation, identify the problem, and execute a solution. The problem was Rebecca. The solution was to remove the victims from her presence immediately. I don't know what to say," Emily stammered, overwhelmed. "You don't have to say anything," David said. "Just pack a small overnight bag for you and Chloe. Do it now. I will handle Mrs. Prescott." The mention of his wife's name brought the fear back into Emily's eyes. "She'll be so angry." "Yes," David said, a grin set to his jaw. "She will. But her anger is no longer your concern. It is mine." He left them then, walking back into the grand hallway. The house was silent, but it was a tense, waiting silence. He could feel Rebecca's presence, even if he couldn't see her. She was probably still in the library, stewing, planning her counterattack. She would likely try tears first. Then, when that didn't work, she would pivot to righteous indignation. She would accuse him of betrayal, of disloyalty. She would try to make this his fault. He walked past the salon. One of the other maids, a young woman named Maria, was quietly sweeping up the shards of the broken figurine, her movements careful and nervous. She glanced up at him, her eyes full of a fear that told him she had likely heard everything. She, too, had been living under Rebecca's reign of terror. He realized the rot was deeper than he had imagined. It wasn't just about Chloe. It was about a culture of fear and intimidation that his wife had cultivated in his own home. He, the great CEO, lauded for his fair treatment of employees and his company's positive work environment, had been presiding over a miniature dictatorship. The hypocrisy of it scalded him. He heard the soft crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. His driver, a stoic ex-military man named George, was here. David went to the front door and opened it, letting the cool night air wash over him. "George," he said, keeping his voice low, "I need you to do something for me. I need you to take Mrs. Carter and her daughter to the Four Seasons. I'll call ahead and have the presidential suite prepared for them. Get them anything they need. Charge it to my personal account. And most importantly, make sure no one disturbs them." George, a man who had seen David through corporate takeovers and personal crises, simply nodded. "Of course, sir. Is everything all right?" "No, George," David said, looking back into the silent, opulent house. "It's not, but it's going to be." A few minutes later, Emily and Chloe came down the hallway, a single small duffel bag in Emily's hand. Chloe was holding her mother's hand in a death grip, her eyes darting nervously around the grand foyer, as if expecting Rebecca to leap out from the shadows. David gave them a reassuring smile. "George will take good care of you," he said. He knelt down one last time in front of Chloe. "You remember what I said? You are safe now, and you are a very brave girl." For the first time that night, a tiny, watery smile touched the girl's lips. "You're brave too, Mr. Prescott," she whispered. His heart ached. He stood up and watched as George led them out to the waiting town car. As the taillights disappeared down the long, tree-lined driveway, David closed the heavy oak door. The satisfying click no longer brought him a sense of peace. It was the sound of a chamber being sealed. It was him and Rebecca, alone in the fortress. And the fortress was about to fall. He turned, and there she was, standing at the top of the grand staircase. She had changed out of her silk dress. She was now wearing a simple but elegant white robe, her hair let down, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked younger, more vulnerable. It was a costume, he knew. A calculated choice. The wronged wife. The innocent victim. "They're gone," she said, her voice soft and wounded. "You sent them away." "I sent them to safety," he corrected her, his voice hard. He walked to the bottom of the staircase and looked up at her. He was done playing games. He was done with the masks and the performances. "We need to talk, Rebecca. And this time, you're going to tell me the truth." Her eyes flashed with anger, but her voice remained deceptively soft. "I have only ever told you the truth, David." "Then this should be a very short conversation," he replied, the ice in his voice unmistakable. "Pack your bags. I want you out of my house. Tonight." The silence that followed his ultimatum was profound. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of 4 years of marriage, of shared laughter that now seemed hollow, of a future that had just evaporated into thin air. Rebecca stood at the top of the stairs, a statue carved from ivory and disbelief. The vulnerable, wronged wife persona she had so carefully constructed moments before shattered, revealing the raw, furious woman beneath. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice dangerously low. "You are throwing me out? Your wife? For them? For a maid and her clumsy child?" "I am throwing you out because of what you did to them," David corrected her, his voice echoing in the cavernous foyer. "I am throwing you out because you are not the person I thought you were. You are a stranger. A cruel, abusive stranger who has been living in my home." She descended the stairs slowly, each step a deliberate, theatrical movement. The soft fabric of her robe whispered against the marble. She stopped a few steps above him, ensuring she still had the advantage of height, looking down on him not just physically, but with an air of supreme condescension. "You are a fool, David," she spat, all pretense of softness gone. "A sentimental, naive fool. You live in a fantasy world where everyone is good and kind. I live in the real world. A world where you have to be strong to survive. A world where people like them. She gestured vaguely toward the front door. Exist to serve people like us. There is no us, Rebecca, David said, the words cutting and precise. There is you, and there is me. And we clearly live in very different worlds. My world is built on the principles my grandfather taught me. Honor, integrity, compassion. What is your world built on? Cruelty? Entitlement? My world is built on success, she countered, her voice rising. The same success you enjoy every single day? Who do you think helps cultivate that? Who sits through those mind-numbingly boring charity dinners? Who charms the wives of your board members? Who creates the perfect backdrop for your perfect life? I do. I manage this house. I manage our social life. I manage you. This is my career, David, and I am very, very good at it. So this is a business arrangement? He asked, a bitter taste in his mouth. All of it? The last 4 years? Was any of it real? For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something, pain, regret, he couldn't be sure, crossed her face. It was there and then gone, replaced by her hardened mask of defiance. It was as real as it needed to be, she said evasively. We were a good team, a power couple, and you were throwing it all away over a broken vase. Stop saying that. David's voice finally rose, a crack of thunder in the still house. This is not about the vase. This is about you hitting a child. This is about you terrorizing a woman who works for us. This is about you threatening to frame her for theft. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think Chloe wouldn't tell me? She should have known better, Rebecca said coldly. Her mother should have taught her loyalty. But that's the problem with their kind. No loyalty, no class. They will always turn on you. He stared at her, truly seeing the depth of her prejudice. It was a sickness in her soul. She genuinely believed in a hierarchy of human worth, and she was at the top. Everyone else was simply a prop in the play of her life. Pack your bags, Rebecca, he repeated, his voice now flat and devoid of all emotion. He was done arguing. He was done trying to understand. I will have my lawyer contact yours in the morning. The prenuptial agreement is quite clear. You will be well provided for, but you will not set foot in this house again. The mention of the prenup, the cold, legal finality of it, seemed to finally break through her wall of arrogance. A new kind of fear entered her eyes. Not the fear of a bully being confronted, but the fear of a queen being dethroned. You wouldn't, she whispered. You wouldn't do this to me. To us. Think of the scandal, David. Tech billionaire David Prescott divorces wife amidst allegations of what? Child abuse. The press would have a field day. It would ruin you. It would ruin the company. No, David said calmly. It won't. Because the story will not be about me. It will be about you. And I have a witness. A 9-year-old girl who I will protect with every resource at my disposal. So you have a choice. You can leave quietly tonight, with your dignity and a generous settlement. Or you can fight me. And if you fight me, Rebecca, I will not hesitate to bring the full truth of what you are into the light of day. I will hire the best child psychologist to testify to the trauma you've inflicted. I will have every member of my staff give sworn depositions about the environment you created in this house. The story won't be about me. It will be about the monster I unknowingly married. He saw the calculations happening behind her eyes. She was weighing her options, assessing the threat. She was a strategist, and she knew when she was outmaneuvered. The public scandal she had threatened him with would be a double-edged sword, and he had just made it clear that his edge was much, much sharper. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. The fight went out of her, replaced by a cold, bitter resentment. You will regret this, she said, her voice a venomous promise. You think you're so righteous, so noble, just like your grandfather. But you're weak, David. Your compassion is a weakness, and one day it will destroy you. I'll take that chance, he replied. Now go. Pack. She turned without another word and ascended the stairs, her back rigid. The battle was over. He had won, but he felt no sense of victory, only a profound, hollowing sadness. He had spent 4 years of his life with a woman he didn't know. He had built a home with her, shared his dreams with her, and it had all been a lie. He sank onto the bottom step of the grand staircase, the adrenaline leaving him, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. The house felt vast and empty around him. He had expelled the poison, but the house itself felt tainted by it. He thought of Chloe, of her terrified little face, and a fresh wave of anger and guilt washed over him. How long had this been going on? How many small cruelties had gone unseen, unheard? How many times had Emily cried on her way home from work? He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Michael," he said when his lawyer answered. "It's David. I need you to do something for me. I need you to find the best real estate agent in the city. Yes, tonight. I want you to find a 3-bedroom house for sale. Something with a yard. In the best school district. It's for Emily Carter, my housekeeper, and her daughter. No, I'm not firing her. I'm buying her a house." He listened for a moment. "No, I haven't lost my mind. I've just found it again. Also, I need you to draft a new employment contract for her. I want you to establish a trust fund for Chloe's education. College, postgrad, whatever she wants. It is to be irrevocable and managed by a third party. And Emily's new salary should be, let's make it 5 times what it is now, effective immediately. She will no longer be a housekeeper. She will be the new household manager, if she'll accept it. She'll oversee the entire staff. She'll be in charge." He was restructuring his world. He was using his power not just to punish the wicked, but to lift up the innocent. It was what the general would have done. True strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about empowering them. He hung up the phone and sat in the silence, listening to the muffled sounds of Rebecca moving around in their bedroom upstairs. The sounds of a life being dismantled. An hour later, she came down the stairs. She was dressed in expensive jeans and a cashmere sweater. 2 large suitcases stood at the top of the stairs. She didn't look at him. "The driver is waiting," he said, his voice flat. He had called George back to the house for one final duty. She walked past him toward the door, then paused, her hand on the ornate handle. "She's not special, you know," Rebecca said, her back still to him. "That little girl. She's just a maid's daughter. There are millions like her. You can't save them all." "No," David said quietly. "I can't save them all, but I could save her. And I did." She opened the door and walked out into the night without a backward glance. David watched through the sidelight windows as George loaded her bags into the trunk of a different car, a simple sedan, not the Bentley. He saw Rebecca get into the back seat. The car pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the darkness, just as Emily and Chloe's had. But this time, it felt different. It felt like a cleansing. The house was finally, truly quiet. The silence was no longer tense or waiting. It was a peaceful, empty silence. A blank slate. He walked into the salon and looked at the spot where the figurine had been. The shattered pieces were gone. The table was wiped clean. It was as if it had never been there. He knew it would take a long time to erase the stain of Rebecca's presence from his home, from his life. There would be legal battles. There would be gossip. His social circle would be in chaos. But as he stood there in the quiet of his reclaimed sanctuary, he didn't feel fear or regret. He felt a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. He had spent his life trying to live up to the portrait of his grandfather, the war hero, the legend. But tonight, he realized he had misunderstood. The general's legacy wasn't about battles fought on foreign soil. It was about the battles fought for what is right, even in the quiet corridors of your own home. It was about protecting the Chloes of the world from the Rebeccas. He picked up his phone and made one more call. It was to the front desk of the Four Seasons. "Hello," he said. "Could you please connect me to the presidential suite? It's for Emily Carter." "No, don't tell her who it is. Just tell her. Tell her a friend is calling to make sure she and her daughter ordered dessert." He smiled, a genuine smile, for the first time that evening. The fortress had been breached, but not by an enemy. It had been breached by the truth. And in the rubble of his old life, he felt the first stirrings of a new foundation being laid. A foundation built not on success or on image, but on something far more valuable. Something a 9-year-old girl with sunshine hair had reminded him of. Kindness. 6 months later, the Prescott estate felt like a different world. The heavy, oppressive silence that had once defined it was replaced by the sound of a child's laughter, bright and clear, echoing across the sun-drenched lawn. David Prescott watched from a garden bench as 9-year-old Chloe Carter chased a soccer ball, her blonde hair flying behind her. The timid, fearful girl from that terrible night was gone, replaced by a confident, joyful child who was thriving in her new school and, more importantly, in a life free from fear. Her mother, Emily, now the estate's household manager, had also blossomed. With her authority assured and her kindness setting the tone, The house had been transformed from a cold mansion into a warm, welcoming home. The divorce had been swift. Faced with the undeniable truth of his actions and the threat of public exposure, Rebecca had accepted the terms of their prenuptial agreement and vanished. She had her money, but she had lost the status and social power she craved. The quiet whispers of her cruelty had followed her, closing the doors to the world she had worshipped. She became a ghost in the life she had fought so hard to build, a wealthy but isolated figure. Chloe, retrieving her ball, ran over to David, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mr. Prescott," she said, out of breath, "Mama's making my favorite for dinner." "And what might that be?" David asked, his smile genuine. "Macaroni and cheese. A meal fit for a queen," he replied solemnly, and she giggled. This easy, warm relationship had become the new center of his life. After Rebecca left, he had thrown himself into making amends. He not only bought Emily and Chloe a beautiful house nearby, but had also established an irrevocable trust for Chloe's education, ensuring her future was secure. He had restructured his own life, prioritizing time at home over long hours at the office. He had found that his grandfather's true legacy wasn't about the battles won in boardrooms, but about the quiet victories of principle and compassion. It was about protecting the innocent and lifting up the deserving. "You know," David said softly to Chloe, "my grandfather always said that a person's true wealth isn't what they have, but what they give." Chloe nodded seriously. "Like when you help me with my homework?" He laughed, a deep, contented sound. "Exactly," he said, "just like that." As Chloe ran back toward the house, David remained on the bench, watching the sunset paint the sky. He had dismantled a life built on a lie and, in its place, had built something real and lasting. In the simple joy of a little girl who was finally safe, he had found a sense of peace and honor that no amount of money could ever buy. And that's where we'll end the story for now. What did you think of this journey? Have you ever experienced something similar, or discovered hidden meaning in an unexpected place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening. Maybe relaxing after work, on a late-night drive, or just winding down. I truly enjoy hearing your own stories. And if you want to make sure we cross paths again, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. There are so many more inspiring journeys waiting to be told. Tell me, where are you watching from today? Remember, the people around us often carry extraordinary gifts we might never expect. Sometimes all it takes is someone believing in them. Until next time, keep your heart open to life's little surprises, and thank you for spending this time with me.